This is Charter Local Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance, and we're in Lansing today inside the state capitol. We are joined by Jon Hoadley. He is a member of the Michigan House of Representatives. And as you know, sir, the last few years have been trying, to say the least, when we look at deaths as a result of handgun violence and other guns as well.
That's right.
We think about what happened in Oregon, in South Carolina, in Virginia, in Connecticut, most recently in Colorado Springs and San Bernardino. The New York Times recently editorialized on its front page looking to end the gun epidemic in America. What's your sense of where we are today on the question of guns?
Brad, I'm so glad we're talking about this. At some point, we have to say enough is enough. The political process is broken when we can't even take simple steps to reduce gun violence here in America. There is not a single state that is immune to mass shootings where 4 or more people are injured or killed in one instance.
It's ironic, you think about San Bernardino, California is known for having the strictest gun control measures of all 50 states, and yet what we've learned is the perpetrators of those acts purportedly received guns outside of the California purview and ammunition from sister states.
And I think that the other takeaway that we have to be aware of is that bad people will do evil things in the world. This is a universal truth. But that in itself shouldn't stop us from taking common sense gun reform issues that will help reduce gun violence. So you're right, because of this lax loopholes that exist in other states, that we have folks who are getting guns that shouldn't have them. And in states that are trying to make sure that we're keeping our people safe, at the same time, most legislatures are either rolling back protections or failing to act on basic issues like universal background checks.
In so many ways, we look at this issue and states are looking and seeing the issue so differently. I remember Texas this year passed legislation that specifically allows weapons on campuses. California passed legislation that specifically disallows weapons on campuses. I mean, these are two of our great states, and yet they are coming out on exact opposite sides on a great issue of the day.
What we see is that data about gun violence is pretty clear. More access equals more death. And in fact, all the data that we're compiling from across the country suggests that the more people have guns on their possession in the instance of a violent incident, the more likely that is to result in death.
What about this notion that guns don't kill people, people kill people?
I mean, at some point though, being able to fire 30 or 90, 99 bullets without stopping kills people too. Like I said, there's no solution that's going to be able to solve all problems. But what we know is that the interpretation that every person should be able to have any weapon that is specifically designed to kill other people is definitely a misinterpretation of the Second Amendment and puts our communities in jeopardy.
What we also know is, for better or for worse, this issue has become incredibly polarized to the point that, for example, recently in Washington, on the Senate floor, a bill was proposed that would preclude those on the no-fly list from receiving guns, and I'm not taking a position, but that bill died.
Absolutely.
And so, we have folks on both sides of this issue seeing slippery slopes.
The only slope has been in the direction of more guns into all people all the time. And while we've seen thoughts and prayers and lip service made to the alternatives, the reality is that most states aren't enacting common sense gun legislation.
So let's talk about this state, because what President Obama seems to be saying is, I can't do anything else on the federal level. It's just not going to happen during my term. States, you need to act. So what's happening here in Michigan?
So I'm ready to act, and my colleagues are ready to act. We've introduced legislation that would close the loophole that allows concealed pistol license holders who openly carry in public buildings like schools. We've introduced legislation that would require universal background checks. But these are getting stalled in a very partisan political process here in Lansing. On my website, jonhoadley.com, in fact, we're building a list of activists and advocates who are ready to get to work on common sense gun legislation.
And let's talk about that, because in the final analysis, there's a reason that gun legislation is dying. And part of that reason, again, it's not a policy question, I'm not taking any position, is that the gun advocates, the Second Amendment advocates, the National Rifle Association, they mobilize their troops. I mean, it is undeniable. They have single issue voters that will vote, and those that are on the quote gun control side, it's not top of agenda, and so you don't have people voting pro-gun control.
I think we're seeing that change, though, where we can no longer turn a blind eye to the fact that our neighbors, our family members, our friends are dying because of gun violence. And there are simple solutions that are being bogged down in the political process that we could fix right now if we could get out of this Republican, Democrat, NRA, everybody else sort of framework.
Well, let's morph then into the question of voting and voting rights. There are 27 states, for example, that allow individuals to vote absentee without reason. Michigan is not one of those states. The requirements to vote absentee are fairly stringent, but there is a proposal floating around that does seem to have support from both parties at some level that will make absentee voting rights more permissive. What's your sense of the proposal?
Well, we have to be careful here. In addition to those 27 states in the District of Columbia, there's also another 3 states that let you vote by mail.
That is true.
And there's a number of states that are making it easier for folks to go vote and exercise our rights. Michigan is not one of them. We, in fact, haven't had significant reform on this issue for decades. Now, here's something that we should note, is that currently there are bills that are floating around that may drastically impact the type of ballots we can cast in the next upcoming presidential election, and a number of bills that are being talked about that would actually limit how clerks can give ballots out to people, taking away rights. And now there's a proposal that would alter the way that folks can request absentee ballots and allow you, if you go in person to the clerk, to get a no-reason absentee ballot.
What do you make of that? I mean, it is a reform, arguably.
Sure.
Is it a reform, at least a small step?
But I think this is window dressing. And we see it when it's coupled with these other bills that would then limit the hours that the clerks can be open, limit their ability to deputize other people to allow that in-person, no-reason absentee voting. I mean, so it's a way for some folks to be able to get a talking point that they're doing something to help voting, while in reality actually taking away the ability for people to go vote.
What about this concern about voter fraud?
It's an unfounded concern. And in particular, where instances of fraud have occurred across the country, there's nothing in these bills that's designed that would actually prevent that. So currently, if you're over the age of 60, you can request a ballot to vote absentee for any reason. Unlike this bill, which says if you're under the age of 60, you have to go do it in person. I mean, why are we making working families and young people go through a more stringent process to exercise the same rights to vote? This doesn't make sense, and it really flies into the face that this is window dressing to cover up a bad set of votes.
We see, again, throughout the states, some states are rushing towards more permissive voting rules. Other states are rushing toward more restrictive voting rules.
Actually, most states are moving towards more permissive voting. I mean, when states like Kansas do online voter registration and Michigan won't even get close to doing it, I mean, I think it says that there are people that are trying to rig the election. You know, one thing I've talked a lot about is that every 20 years or so, there's a point where people have a process-focused election. And I think we're getting close to that right now. People don't know why exactly, but I think we all have a sense that the game is rigged before we start even playing. In that case, I think it's something to do with these very gerrymandered districts, short-term limits that give more power to lobbyists than voters, and very high campaign finance systems that mean that most politicians are always out looking for money. You combine that with things that limit access to voting, and you've got a recipe for bad government.
His name is Jon Hoadley. He is a member of the Michigan House of Representatives. My name is Brad Pomerance. We are in Lansing today, inside the state capitol, and this is Charter Local Edition.